Yeah, that is.
You're late. Attention.
Graduation starts at 7 o'clock.
Here we go.
The music starts playing.
And Dan was even worse than you about that.
Well, you start doing it late, then they start coming later because they're figuring, oh, they don't start on time.
Yeah. Besides, with graduation, everyone's nervous, so it's better to get started on time.
I don't like the live mic around me. I'm waiting to slip up.
I know. It's gonna happen.
Too cold for people to come out, I guess.
I guess, maybe that's it. I go walking in the cold.
So do I. I usually around 5 o'clock every morning.
When I'm thinking about starting the buzz, for God's sake, I'm starting to read things. I'll think about the cold in the dark with your dog.
Sometimes she'll only go to the end of the street and she's like, I've had enough, turn around. She'll just plant her feet.
I've seen the dogs in the neighborhood do that. There's a woman who has a Great Dane.
go
When
ahead.
he doesn't want to go somewhere,
I'm not gonna argue. I'm not taking on that battle.
no. Okay, shall we get started?
Yes, go.
Are you all set? Are we on?
She's
Are
good.
we ready?
She's good.
Okay. The board met tonight in executive session. We're now ready to go into the public portion of our meeting. For those of you who wonder why I'm rapping on this block of wood, it's because my gavel is missing. So, we hope that it will be recovered after a while. Anyway, the board had some public communications since our last meeting. We heard from, I think the first one was from Eric Goldman, and I see him, about a request from the CPAC with regard to interaction around the special education audit. So I know that Mr. Phillips has communicated on that subject. We had an email from David Manzo in support of getting students back in class full time. The answer to that is evident. We had an email from Jacob Schwarm on the same subject in support of full-time in-class education. And we had an email from Felice Bettenbender with regard to the implementation of the AAPI curricular changes that are now, that are part of the law that was signed just 10 days ago. And I know that as with all curricular additions, our policy consultant helps us develop a policy, which is required by the law, and then we have a process for making curricular changes and additions, and so that is an ongoing process, and I know Mr. Phillips will talk further about it. And then we had an email from Doug Snyder with regard to COVID testing for our student athletes. And as you know, the COVID situation is evolving, the testing situation is evolving, and I know that Mr. Phillips is going to say a few words about that in his report as well. So those were all of the communications that arrived by our deadline this morning for public communications. And now I will go to the President's report. One of our resolutions as a board was to go over our board goals more frequently to help keep us on track. So with that in mind, I'm going to go through those goals and talk just briefly about what we're doing, knowing that it's early in the year. But our first goal, we have two personnel goals. The first is to support and review efforts to meet staffing needs during the ongoing pandemic crisis, including staffing needs for the 2021-2022 school year as part of the budget process. The Finance Committee has met with Mr. Phillips and Mrs. Murphy, and we have started that process. Obviously, we haven't gotten down to the finer points of the process yet because we are missing big pieces of our financial picture, that being healthcare increases and also state aid. Healthcare increases, I know we'll find out about shortly. State aid usually comes 48 hours after the budget speech, the governor's budget speech, which is usually in the middle of February. So as we know what our revenues are in addition to tax revenue, we'll be able to define more clearly what we can and can't do with those revenues. So that's in progress. We agreed to review and refine the district's plan to increase diversity in the candidate pool for faculty and staff positions. That's something that takes place in the Personnel Committee of the board. And as you have seen from our agendas, our hiring situation, in common with most other districts in New Jersey, is very fluid. But I know we are members of CJ Pride, which is the group that we've talked about that is the sort of a collective of a lot of human resource professionals and administrators from many districts in New Jersey who meet with the common goal of increasing diversity in the workforce. And I believe CJ Pride is having their job fair this year, yes?
Correct.
And in March?
Correct.
So there will be a CJ Pride job fair in March, and hopefully, you know, there's a shortage of teaching candidates of all kinds, but hopefully we're participating in that job fair as part of CJ Pride and hoping for a positive outcome. In finance and facilities, we are overseeing the changing allocation of financial resources to meet the demands of the ongoing COVID-19 situation. You know, clearly, as you've heard, there are resources from the federal government that are mostly allocated, and they're very specific. The feds are very specific in their allocation of resources, but finance and facilities is reviewing that on an ongoing basis. And then in curriculum, monitor the hybrid delivery of content and authentic assessment. And when we talk about hybrid delivery of content, obviously we're talking about our experiences with online. We're talking about different ways of delivering our content. We have not really gotten into that yet as a curriculum committee, but I know that we will shortly. And developing a review process for initiatives like class rotations, option 2, et cetera, that fall outside of our regular 5-year curriculum cycle. And that's something that is pending in curriculum committee as well. And then in negotiations, our goal is to conduct successful negotiations leading to a new contract, well, we said with GRPS administrators. We have concluded that contract. You see on our agenda tonight, we've concluded a new contract with the superintendent, where that's up for approval. We also, tomorrow morning, will have our preliminary organizational meeting that will culminate in the beginning of negotiations with the teachers union, the GREA. Their contract expires June 30th, so we are moving forward on what we know will be a thoughtful and constructive, but given the situation in which we live, the times in which we live, the outcome of COVID, going to be a process with many, many components. So that's where we are on the district goals, on the board goals, I'm sorry. And now it is time for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Betsy. I have several presentations tonight, so we're going to start off with our student government, who's here to tell us about what's happening at the high school. And we have 3 members, Ryan O'Neill, Maggie Brown, and Mike Cifelli here tonight.
Thank you to Mr. Phillips and the Board of Education for having us this evening. My name is Maggie Brown, and I'm the president of the High School Student Council.
Hello, my name is Michael Cifelli. I'm the Executive Treasurer of Student Council and Co-Senior President.
And I'm Ryan O'Neill. I'm Executive Secretary of the Student Council and also Co-Senior President.
In the past month since we last reported, the Student Council has closed out a few events we were planning and are in the process of putting together events for the coming months. Before the holiday break, Student Council hosted 2 events, a Spirit Week and a Candygram sale. The Spirit Week was a fun way to build on the excitement of the week before the break, and it was great to see all the grades participating together in dress-up days, including Ugly Sweater Day, Beach Day, and Cozy PJ Day.
During lunch periods, the Student Council sold candy cane grams for students to send to their peers and teachers. This event was a huge success, with over $100 of candy canes being delivered before the break. The money raised through this event is being donated to the Montclair Human Needs Pantry. The Student Council is preparing for one of our favorite school events, the Battle of the Pizzas. This event is a fundraiser for student activities and has always been a huge hit and an anticipated annual event. Pizzerias from the community, including Angelo's, Mr. Dino's, Aupie's, and Enzo's, donate pizzas to the event, and all Glenridge students, parents, and staff members are invited to join an all-you-can-eat pizza party for $5.
At the end of the event, attendees vote on which pizza was the best, and that pizzeria is awarded the Glenridge's favorite pizza. We initially had this event scheduled at the end of January, but have rescheduled in the light of rising COVID cases. This year, we are excited to host the event in the spring and are looking to organize it outside to host even more members of the Glenridge community. We've also been meeting with the Glenridge High School administration to prepare for upcoming events in the coming month, including Ridger Days and Spring Dances. We hope to continue to host events that bring our student populations together with pride. Thank you for your time and your ongoing support for student activities. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is the Central School Spotlight, and Dr. Keisha Harris is here to join us. Dr. Harris is a veteran staff member, but she's serving her first year as a building principal. She's done a tremendous job working with the students, the staff, and the parents in creating identity for Central School. Dr. Harris?
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I have to get the mic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, to the board, parents, all my peeps. Let's talk a little bit about Central School because it has changed greatly since 1925. I believe it was bought for about $190,000, but I'm here to say that I'm pretty sure it took a whole lot more than that to get us up and running. Here at Central School, I tell your students every single morning on the loudspeaker, we like you, we love you, and we think the world of you. And on Fridays, we roar. The truth of the matter is that cheetahs don't roar. They don't. They chirp. However, I did not believe that was strong enough. Didn't have the impact I wanted it to have. So we roar on Fridays. So I apologize if at home your student comes home on Friday and they're screaming through the house. We encourage it. The district has a mission and it's located on the district website. However, we have a vision for Central School to provide a safe, inclusive, supportive learning environment for both our students as well as our staff. We know that we will have hit the mark, right, when we have these things in place, and we are already hitting the ground running. We've got great teachers and staff. We have academic support in the form of a new academic support teacher. We have social emotional learning and guidance support. We're continuing to grow there. We are happy to report we are continuing to grow with DEI programming along with parent push-in. Home and school, I have to shout them out because we've been tied at the hip in order to make wonderful, enriching opportunities for our students. And we are focused on building home connections. The truth of the matter is that our students learn from you. And then they come to school and we support and extend and enrich what is already in place. Ms. Kren and Ms. Goss, super teachers. These are examples of some of our fabulous, wonderful staff. Ms. Kren is our Teacher of the Year. She teaches first grade. And Ms. Goss, who I had to wrangle down, for a photo. She is our Service Professional Provider of the Year. But I want to give you a tour of Central School, because for the most part, you haven't been able to come in and enjoy the halls, the building, my office, a cup of coffee. So let's take a tour. When you first walk in, the first word you're going to see is welcome. We extend you a nice welcome. You'll find Miss Wall sitting at the desk. She's going to ask you, how may I help you? Hopefully she's going to block a little for me. And the door that you see at the top is my office door. You're going to come on in. You're going to ignore that back messy wall there that I've got going on. I'm going to greet you, and I'm going to say, come on in. Let's take a walk down the hallway. Let me show you what your students are doing during the course of the day. You're going to find an inclusive environment. We continue to grow as we ask parents to come in and push in and to share. We have parents even this week who have shared their cultures and have recorded so that we can push it back into the student body. So, one wonderful thing at Central is that if you attend Central, that means you have mom, dad, or whomever who also has a culture, has a particular point of view, and they can share it with us here. Parents read stories, they help us to do crafts, they help us with bulletin boards, and we had a little light garden where each student was given a little light, and no matter what your culture was or however you celebrated, it was highlighted here and then illuminated at night. If you walk the hallways, you're going to see some of our values. You're going to see a gratitude tree. You're going to see a bulletin board on kindness. In fact, this week is our week of kindness. You're going to see peace. You're going to also see respect. Continue upstairs, you're going to find student-centered bulletin boards. You're going to find open classroom doors. You're going to probably see Mr. John, who's right there in the middle, waving to you and asking you, what do you need? Where can I direct you? Upstairs on the 3rd floor, best place in the entire building to visit, because you can sit down and read and relax and take in the day. You can look outside to the parking lot and see the beautiful trees, and the library is becoming more and more full with our inventory and stock of books. Still a work in progress, but definitely functional and fun. You're going to see a lot of creativity in the hallway, not just from art class, but students are encouraged to express themselves, and they do, whether it's through art or through music. And we have fun. Shout out to the Home and School who provides us with enrichment activities. Students are able to take part and, yeah, this was fun. I think there was a conversation going around. We were saying we wanted to take that marsupial home. And then when we got home, we looked at a YouTube video about kangaroos and changed our mind completely. Very cute in theory. So thank you to Home and School. I want to also say that Home and School allows our staff as well as our students to feel comfortable coming to school. They staff, and stock our pantries. They provide activities for our students to do. They make little bags and bring them in so that students can do crafts and have fun. The heart. This is what we're here for. This is the important stuff right here. These students. Every single day when we come in, no matter what our mood is, no matter what we feel like, we remember what's most important. It's right there. These students, and making sure that they still enjoy school, making sure that we turn on the light in their brain and give them hope and give them inspiration and to help facilitate their learning. This, seeing the creativity, seeing them get it, seeing them flourish, seeing them grow up and then present at the high school level, it's astounding. Foundation starts here. And then here we are, crazy ragtag team. We were crayons, I was the crayon box, don't judge us. We were happy, the kids were happy, we dressed up, and we have fun because we're in it together. All of us support one another. Are we perfect? No. Are we growing? Yes. I feel very fortunate to work with the staff here. You have veteran teachers here. You have some new teachers, but veteran teachers here who are happy to be here, happy to do their jobs, happy to be stretched, happy to be challenged, and happy to grow. Central School. That's the front of the school. That's really the back of the school now. Whole different conversation for another time. However, the wonderful thing about Central School is even though I kind of see us as a little brother or little sister right now to Forest and to Linden, please understand, we may have started off with a crawl. By the end of this year, we will be at full sprint. So thank you for letting me show off my fabulous, wonderful school and all of what makes it important and incredibly special to me.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Very nice. I vaguely remember your office from spending 2 years there.
Oh, that's bad.
I was going to do my superintendent's report, but I'm going to be respectful of our next presenter's time and have him go. Our next presenter is going to present our special education audit. As with any audit report, you're going to find out about some of our strengths, some of our weaknesses, or areas that we need to improvement. As with our special education, just so you guys are aware, we have roughly 320 students in our district that are classified, and that represents a little under 17% of our total student population. We hired the Recerca group to come in and do an audit of our program, and they did that through surveys, interviews with parents, staff members, administrators, board members. They reviewed IEPs. They came into each of our buildings and observed what was happening in the classrooms in different settings, and also observing IEP meetings. And tonight we have Dr. Christopher Tinkin here to share his findings and recommendations. And I just want to say that this step right now is the audit report is coming to an end, but it's just one of the many steps in this process. After tonight, we'll get people an opportunity to give us some feedback, ask some questions. We'll have the report up and posted by the end of the day tomorrow, and from there, we'll begin to meet with other groups. We'll meet with the parents. We'll meet with administrators, child study team members, and staff to talk about the report and components that they thought were very important, because that's going to help us develop a list of how to prioritize what actions we need to take next. And from there, we'll probably end up forming smaller little committees to complete those tasks as and develop those action plans. So I wanted the parents to know on February 10th, we're planning, Mr. DeWitt and I are planning on hosting a Q&A for the parents. I know typically in March, a couple board members and I will sit down and meet with Grace, and we can follow up at that time also on the report and where we are with it. And it will be just another opportunity for us to receive feedback. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tinkin to share his findings.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Mr. Phillips said, I'll provide a I'll provide a summary overview of the work that we did in the district starting on August 20th. So provide an overview of what we did in terms of how we did it, and then I'll get into the methods that we used to come to the conclusions that we drew and the recommendations, talk about the disproportionality analysis that we conducted, and then I'll get into the heart of the report, which will be the themes and recommendations. And then I'll take questions by the board. So as you know, we were contracted by the board to conduct an independent, systemic review of the district's processes in terms of student intervention, special education programming, and then report those findings back to you, both in a written report and in this presentation tonight. We selected team members to work on this review who had no connections to the district. The way we work is when we go into districts, we make sure that we choose team members who are not associated in any way with the district, don't have any relationship to the administrators or the board, so that we act in a way that's truly independent. And we also make sure to choose team members who do not work in the county either, to remain independent. So none of us were familiar with the administrators, the board, or the staff prior to our work here tonight. So the team consisted of 4 people. Myself, I'm currently a university professor, teach graduate school in education leadership, management, and policy. But before that, I was a school leader, actually an assistant superintendent in a larger district, middle school principal, assistant principal, director of curriculum, and I started out as a teacher. So I bring the K-12 experiences. We also had a current director of special education and someone who also serves as a parent advocate. Had a retired superintendent who was also a former director of special education. And then also the 4th person to round out the team was a current supervisor of special education. Again, I just want to remind the board, and I know we spoke about this when we were doing interviews, and also when I was interviewed by you on several occasions on the committee that interviewed me, that is. We are not a regulatory agency in any way. So we can't make the district do anything, okay? We provide recommendations for consideration. So I'm going to be very careful to stay in my lane, so to speak. And I think some of you, when we conducted interviews, we were clear that there's the things that we can do and things we can't do. So we're really on the recommendation side of things. We don't represent the district in any way, of course, and we can't speak for the district. The way we see it is we're another set of eyes for you. So we can provide independent feedback, and our real goal is to provide you with suggestions and recommendations to increase effectiveness and consistency of the programming that you have here across the district. Again, remember, we're taking a systemic approach to what we did. So we're not really involved in the granularity of the day-to-day issues with specific students or cases. So in that way, it's really hard for us to answer specific questions that might be tied to specific students or cases. Also, hypotheticals or what-ifs could be difficult for us. So, when we get to the question and answering phase, if you do ask me a question and I look like I'm dancing around, it's not that I'm trying to avoid answering you in any way. I want to make sure that we provide you with answers that we can answer, and there's certain things that we just can't answer, specifically when it involves individual students or could involve individual students. Okay, so we didn't investigate individual cases. That wasn't the scope of the agreement that you had with us. That would require a different type of work, a different approach, different time frame, and different resources. Also, I just want to make it clear that this is not a personnel evaluation in any way, so we're also very careful not to cross over into that type of work. That's a different type of review. Also, the report doesn't cover anything to do with standardized testing, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. But some of the main ones, generally speaking, they're just poor indicators of deeper learning, okay? They're not designed with students with disabilities in mind. They don't match the formats or processes in which some of the students learn or the way that they're asked to demonstrate learning. So many times what you find is these tests will miss, they do a poor job of uncovering learning. Okay, and they also, in many cases, they don't allow for the specific modifications and accommodations that some students have in their IEP. They do allow for certain modifications on state standardized tests. That is true, but it's not as deep as you would find in an IEP. They're not multisensory in nature. They don't recognize neurodiversity. It's really more of a one-size-fits-all assessment. It's just one assessment among many others that should be considered in terms of achievement. And they're clearly not always aligned to the goals and objectives of the IEP, because the IEP is meant for an individualized education plan. Okay, so that's why we don't really get into that with these kinds of reviews. So we began our work on August 20th, started collecting data at that point, and we finished actually exactly 4 months later, December 20th, 2021. We conducted our review through the lens of continuous improvement. When I was interviewed by your stakeholder committee, when you were trying to decide which firm to go with, we heard loud and clear that you were interested in continuous improvement, and we made an agreement with you that that's the way we would approach this. So that's what we were looking at. We used a process-based approach to this review because we wanted to understand and give you information to better understand how well the processes and procedures are working across your district in terms of student intervention and student services. Okay, so we're looking at it from a systemic point of view, pre-K through grade 12. So as Mr. Phillips started to talk about, we used quantitative and qualitative data collection here. So we did focus group interviews, we did individual interviews, we had an open-ended questionnaire sent to parents, guardians, and caregivers of students with disabilities. We conducted IEP reviews. We did classroom observations in all of the schools. We observed IEP meetings remotely. The classroom observations were on site. The IEP observations were conducted remotely. We also reviewed your website, and we looked at other data from NJ Smart, NJ DOE reports, IEP Direct, Frontline, all of those kind of web-based and online data points. In terms of the semi-structured focus groups that we did, and also the individual interviews, we had more than 120 people involved in those, representing a wide range of stakeholders in the district. First, we had parents, guardians, caregivers representing various special education programs. I want to give a special thank you to Mr. Eric Goldman for helping to set those up. He really provided us with what I think was a very rich cross-section of parents, guardians, and caregivers in the district. So I want to thank him again publicly. We interviewed many of the Board of Education members who are here tonight, the Director of Student Services, CST members and related arts, central office through Mr. Phillips, all of the principals. We spent time with the principals and also the teaching staff. We interviewed them through Zoom, and I was also able to speak to individual teaching staff members during the course of my day in the buildings and during observations and whatnot. So we really tried to take a layered approach to this and do it sequentially on purpose. So we started with Board of Education interviews and IEP reviews because we wanted to get a sense of where what the board was seeing at their level, because you have access to information and you're also presented with information from the public. So it's important for us to get that perspective first, and at the same time start doing the IEP reviews, because as you're giving us data, we're diving into the IEPs as well, looking at what exists, but also taking in the data that you're giving us as we review those IEPs. Then we started with the parent, guardians, and caregiver interviews, and we continued to go through IEPs. So we had one layer of information from the board, then we get another layer of information. We continue to look at those IEPs as those layers of information stack up. Then we did our website reviews, NJ Smart, DOE, Frontline, so on and so forth. Then we started to meet with CST members, related service providers. We put out the surveys to the parents, guardians, and caregivers at that time, and we continued to look at IEPs. From there, once we had all of those data, then it was time to come in to the classrooms and see if we wanted to see if we would see what we're being told we would see. Okay, at that point, we're trying to confirm things that are coming through the interview data and the things we're seeing in the IEP. Are those items starting to show up in the classroom? Because if there is a systemic theme, you would definitely want to see that. You would expect to see that theme not only in interviews, not only on paper trails, but in the actual day-to-day observation. So that's why we put that kind of in the middle of the review. And we continued IEP reviews during that time as well. I would actually thank you to Mr. DeWitt for the schedule that he was able to set up. It was very highly organized, the classroom observation schedule. What that allowed me to do was I knew who the teacher I was going to see, what period it was going to be. I could then go into the IEP program, and I can look at specific student IEPs that should be in that class. I can look at those IEPs, and then I could go watch the instruction of those specific students to see the level at which the IEP was being implemented, accommodations, modifications, so on and so forth, okay? And so that's what I did. After that, then we went to the next layer, IEP meetings. Okay, we had the special education director sat in on the IEP meetings, and we reported that in the report. And at that point, after the IEP meetings, we did another round of IEP reviews, and then we finished our reviews of the IEPs. Then we came back, talked to the director of student services and superintendent, and then we conducted some follow-ups as necessary with different staff members. But that was the way that we kind of peeled the onion to try to get down through multiple layers and have what we think is a more comprehensive view of things. We ended up with a mountain of data, obviously. We used qualitative content analysis with inductive category application to analyze all this. We did single case, we did cross case, but I think the most important thing is everything was read by a human. We did not put any data into a computer and let the computer tell us what themes it thinks it found. The layered approach that we used allowed us to, we really needed to read the data to connect all the dots. So everything was hand-coded. Okay, so again, I want to thank everybody who was involved in this because it was a comprehensive process for Mr. Phillips, the Board of Education, Grace and CPAC leadership, the parents, guardians, caregivers who gave up their time during these interviews, the Director of Student Services, the CST, related services, the teaching staff, and the students. The students were great. It's one of the reasons I love to do classroom observation because I'm sitting in the classroom, especially down in Mrs. Harris's, Dr. Harris's building, and over at Roz. You know, I'm sitting in these classrooms, and the kids they're waving, they're looking at me, smiling. Well, some of them could come up and talk to me, and I'm trying. Of course, I'm trying not to draw attention because I don't want to disturb the class. But they were so cute, so accommodating. Over at Roz, I'm standing in the office, trying to wait to see the principal, and a student walks right in the office. He sees me standing there, and he says, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" Like, great. Now I'm doing great. The custodian was even helpful. I was stuck in line getting in with kids coming in during lunch, and he saw me. He knew I was, obviously I looked lost and confused. Come right in, sir. Non-certified staff were wonderful, the secretaries. And I tell you that because I think it's important for you to know how your district is perceived by outsiders like me. And when I came to your district, I felt very comfortable. So I just wanted to share that with you. Okay, so when we do work like this, when we do reviews like this, we have a framework that we look at things through, and so we use the NJTSS as part of our framework in conjunction with the continuum of special education services, because we know there is a connection with the student services, general education, things like intervention referral services, so on and so forth. So we try to look at that as a full approach. Okay, so one of the first things that we did in terms of data analysis was we began to just look at areas of disproportionality. We didn't find any evidence of that. You see in the report, we ran a lot of statistics on disproportionality in different ways. We didn't find any, nor did we find any by gender. Gender-wise, at least from the data we looked at, it was 52% male, 48% female in terms of special education classifications. And we could find no record of the district being cited by the state for anything related to disproportionality in at least the last 7 years. I think we went back to 2015. Okay, so the main body of the report is based on the major themes and recommendations. So these were conducted, of course, in the spirit of continuous improvement. The district, based on what we saw, has a strong foundation of existing program, and the recommendations contained in the report that you've received and that will be posted, as Mr. Phillips said, I think posted tomorrow afternoon at some point, we ask that they be interpreted as suggestions to help increase the effectiveness and consistency of existing programs, and just inform your plans going forward. You have board goals, you have strategic goals. I believe this report is another piece of data that you can use, along with other data that you have. Okay, so again, we sought to identify systemic themes. We categorized, so I think it's important you know how we arrived at a theme. We categorized something as a theme if there were at least three data points. So we were looking at triangulation of data here to make sure that we were actually finding something that's systemic, okay? So for example, a theme could be categorized if we heard something come across in the interviews, okay, across interviews, then we start to see it in the document review that we did, and then maybe we saw it in the on-site observation. And there comes a point where you start to get data saturation, where you start seeing, hearing the same thing over and over again. At that point, we know we have a theme, and that's how it ended up in the report. Okay, so some realities that we became aware of as we started to put the data together. The district, we see the district is constrained in some ways by its enrollment size. You're not a large district. You're a rather small K-8 district, K-12 district. The administrative staff we found to be smaller compared to similar-sized districts. You have less administrators in similar-sized districts and even some smaller districts. And of course, as Dr. Ginsburg was talking, the budgets are constrained. They're constrained all around New Jersey, and Glen Ridge is no different. You have budget constraints, and sometimes those budget constraints cause you to make choices, and those options, in some ways, can interfere with peak performance. That's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. Small student population, we found, constrains the scheduling. So, you don't have a lot of options in terms of where to put certain courses or programs, times of day that those things can occur. You do have a lot of programs, but I understand, from parents and teachers, I can understand the frustration because some programs only happen after school, and kids might have 3 other things going on after school, but that's the scheduling that you run into in a smaller district. So you're constrained in that way. And that could limit the effectiveness of services. It just can. It doesn't mean that they're not effective. It just limits their effectiveness. And it also causes some inconsistency. The budget constraints, I know the business administrator knows this well. There's just difficulty nowadays with expanding the budget beyond the 2% cap. You need discretionary funds to do some of the things that we're talking about in this report. And I understand that. We understand that. especially when it comes down to additional staff or leadership to grow some of these things and monitor. Okay, so overall, when we put all the data together, we came up with this list of themes that came out after data triangulation. We included all of those for you in the written report. Okay, they're all in there. I'm going to go through most of them tonight. I'm not going to go through every single point that's in the report, obviously. It's, whatever, it's 50 pages or whatever it is. But I'm going to give you a flavor of some of the overall, maybe big picture from most of those tonight. Okay, before I do that, we do have a set of overarching takeaways just after conducting this that we want to share with you, just for your consideration. So the data suggests that the district offers, yes, a wide range of programming for its size. However, we found inconsistencies in the effectiveness within the programming and some processes. Programs and processes require ongoing monitoring. So, the more monitoring and attention that you can provide to programs, the more consistent, the more effective that they can operate. So, what we found was most of the areas of inconsistency that draw concerns from stakeholders, yes, those concerns are real. And quite honestly, sometimes it's difficult, we think, based on what we saw and heard, it's difficult for the district to address all of those concerns at maximum effectiveness, due in part to a lack of human resources in the district. And I'm going to talk more about that tonight. Because you need people to monitor all these programs. You have a lot of puzzle pieces here. Some districts, when you do puzzles, there's the easy ones, they only have like 20 pieces, okay? Other puzzles, they have 1,000 pieces. Your district has a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And there needs to be greater monitoring of that. So we attribute a substantial amount of the inconsistency here to a real lack of a middle-level leadership position. Okay, and the potential for some staff in other areas as well. We categorize it as too few people doing too many jobs. And I don't think that comes to a surprise to anyone. I'm going to address a little bit more of that as we go on. So, look, although there's a lot of recommendations in here, I understand that. Some of those can certainly begin to be addressed without additional staff. Absolutely. But some of the other ones, especially that relate directly to more consistency, higher effectiveness, we feel strongly, based on the data and what we see, that additional staffing could be required to get to a higher level of effectiveness. Okay, so we say, look, we know things don't happen overnight, especially when it comes to budgeting. These things take time. They take a kind of a look into the future. So consider a 4 to 5 year time frame. I know I provide a sample 4-year in the back of that report, okay? 4 to 5 years planning in full implementation, right? Step by step. And I am well aware that the report could contain more recommendations than is possible in 4 to 5 years. But you hired me to do a job, and that's what we did. But I do understand there might be more that's in there. Okay, so in terms of our first major theme, it's this idea of being systemic and proactive towards programming. So again, use that NJTSS and the continuum of services. Continue to use that to drive the implementation of programming. And we like the NJTSS because it really focuses on the whole child. You have academic, you have behavioral, you have social, you have emotional. And I think that keeps everything, it keeps all of those factors at the forefront. It doesn't prioritize academic over social or emotional. It doesn't prioritize behavioral over academic. really asks you to look at all of the pieces there. So we think that's important. Another thing we think is important here is ensure that articulation and orientation meetings occur for students who have IEPs, whether that be from grade to grade or school to school. We found that teachers, parents, guardians, caregivers, and staff really benefit from more articulation versus less. So the more articulation that you can have among and within the teachers and the parents, I think it's going to make for smoother, more consistent programming, grade to grade, and then school to school. One way to do that is to make greater use of some common protocols. So no matter what's happening from grade to grade or school to school, there's certain things that are always the same in terms of running IEP meetings, IEP development, kind of data that is collected for progress monitoring, which is very important. And also how to report progress monitoring. The district has done a lot with dyslexia in the past several years, so you want to make sure that that is consistent across schools through dyslexia screening, things like that. INRS processes, you have very well functioning INRS teams. You want to make sure that they function similarly across school buildings, okay? And remember, they operate at the school level INRS, right? RTI operates at the school level for many cases. You want to make sure it's similar across the district. And then a focus on monitoring effectiveness and consistency of programs based on data-informed progress monitoring. I think you're going to see the word progress monitoring throughout this presentation. I think it's very important that it occurs systemically. Continue to prioritize mental health and social emotional. It's no secret, Glen Ridge is an academically focused district. And so what happens sometimes in academically focused districts is it's possible to, social emotional sometimes doesn't get the spotlight, okay? And we're asking, keep NJTSS involved, give social and emotional the spotlight, just like academics are spotlighted. Continue to do that. Increase the inclusion of K-6, increase use of inclusion in K-6 as applicable based on student data. We see evidence that you do. You're looking for inclusion opportunities, okay? And we put this in every report. We just want to make sure that districts are always actively, proactively looking for inclusion opportunities. So continue to do that in the different ways that you do. Also strengthen the linkages between general ed and student service programs, because a lot of those linkages revolve around professional training for teachers, okay? And so you do have a wide range of professional development here. Another positive thing, in talking with the staff indicated to us that, yes, we get a lot of professional development, but there's certain things that we think at this point in time, given the pandemic, given everything that's going on, the changes in student learning because of being remote sometimes and those things, they did ask for areas as behavior support, reading they are very happy with the amount of changes that have occurred with dyslexia and all those resources that are being brought in. They want more in terms of reading interventions. Looking at accommodations versus modifications. I think that's always a little confusing sometimes in districts, especially if you're not a trained special education teacher. I totally understand that. So a little bit of training there would be helpful. Effective co-teaching. So in some classes, you have inclusion classes and you have 2 certified teachers, one general education, one special education teacher, okay? There's different models that districts can use that we talk about in the report. Teachers are very open to some retraining in that as well. Dyslexia screening continue. Teachers want more information about that, and also I think because of the work that you've done now for the past couple of years, they are seeing the value of multisensory reading instruction, but not of course, teachers are at different places with that in terms of their skill level. They would definitely appreciate some more training there as well. And all of these all of these things happen to also relate to some of the major themes that we found. So, you know, in talking with the teachers, they're feeling these things as well. Okay, another theme that came out is this idea of communication. So obviously you want to strive for open and systemic communication. So one of the things that you might want to do in looking at your website, maybe there's some enhancements that can be made. And we cite the Princeton School District website, specifically their website for student services, because you have a website, you have information on it. In hearing what your parents and guardians, caregivers were telling us, there seems to be a need for some more specific information. One of the easiest ways to do that, to make and make it universal, is put it out on the website. So Princeton has what I think is a pretty good website in terms of information provided publicly. Okay, it's just one example. It's not. We're not saying that is what you must do, but I think it's a pretty good example. If you get a chance, take a look at it and see what you think. There's also, again, checklists and flow charts to guide discussions, especially at Iep meetings, INRS meetings. Might be helpful both for teachers and parents, so they know the way the discussion, what should be discussed. Okay. I think especially if you're a newer parent, guardian, or caregiver in this process, it is overwhelming. And so if there's more information that the district can provide, this already provides information. Maybe there's just a little bit more in terms of guiding the parents through these discussions. I think it could be very helpful. And then return inquiries within 24 hours to let stakeholders know the communication is received. Communication does get returned here. We know that. Sometimes it's not that you have to give a detailed answer in 24 hours. Some of the questions that you're receiving, you can't answer them in 24 hours. But I think people just want to know that, yep, we received it. We're going to get back to you, and you know, give us 3 or 4 or 5 days to do that. I just think that's the waiting. The waiting is the hardest part, especially I think when you're new to this, right? You know, you want answers, and so I just think knowing that you're being heard is important here. Okay, and again, chain of command information. I know you have this on your website. I just point you to Princeton again, only because it's very specific. They really break it down into different situations. So if you have this question, here's the chain of command. If you have this question, and they have different categories listed. You have that, okay? All we're saying is maybe you want to add some more categories based on some of the kind of most common things that you're receiving questions about. This way, people don't get frustrated because they call the wrong person, right? Which then increases the wait time for a response, and then it makes the district look like it's not communicating. When it is, you're just not getting the communication to the right person at the right time. Thin staffing, absolutely one cause for communication lapses. Because you have people who are involved in multiple meetings, observations, testing, meetings with parents. So a call or emails can come in, but their schedules are packed for several days. Okay, so that is a thin staffing issue. But doesn't mean you can't acknowledge that the email came in or the phone call came in, and give people a little wait time, so at least they know what to expect. Okay, so again, another theme is that when students are moving between schools, so they're kind of moving up the ladder here, just again, sometimes there's inconsistency in the information being brought from one school to the other school. And teachers and parents sometimes feel that they are kind of starting over in the beginning of the year. So again, just look at the process that you already have processes in place for this. You have this. You have it covered, okay? Part of it is just how can you increase the effectiveness of what you already have. So this is just a suggestion. Consider maybe adding some half-day professional development days if possible. I know they're difficult for parents because then the parents have to pick the kids up, but or maybe there's other meeting time that the schools can add for this kind of specific articulation so that it doesn't interfere with the calendar. We're just asking you to think about where is there time, where can you get some more time for a little bit more articulation here. Also, you do have an existing move-up day, which is good. Again, teachers especially are asking for a little more time to understand, have more time to get to know these kids, talk to the teacher from the year before, what's working, right? Because that's going to make it more efficient. Yes, the teachers go through the IEPs. Yes, they all read them. But there's a difference between reading a child's IEP and talking with someone who worked with that child and kind of knows some of the things that are going to make that child more successful. So that's the kind of communication that you want to have, the kind of what's working communication to make things more effective. You might be able to do that, take some time from faculty meetings. I know the first day back is, I mean, there's just not enough time in the day, but if you do have time the first day back to maybe peel off some teachers to make that happen, there's different ways to find time, and all we're asking is try to find a little time there. Out-of-district placements, you have approximately 7% of classified students who are currently in out-of-district placements. That's not a high number. And again, you know, we don't really compare districts with this because it all comes down to student need. But if you were to ask me, well, what's a high number? We start to get concerned when we see numbers 10%, 11%, those kinds of things, okay? You don't have that. It seems as if you do take a pretty proactive approach here in looking for students, but keep in mind, you know, some of these programs that you would need to run to bring students back, you can't just have one student in there. It's not a good setup to have one student in a program. So you generally need 3 or 4 students who have similar age ranges, similar needs to get a viable program up and running. When you do find that group of students and you do begin to bring students, you do begin the process, ensure that there's open communication with the parents and that they are obviously full participants in that planning process. Because, you know, after students have been out of the district, maybe they've never been in the district, they started their career out of the district, there needs to be an induction program for students to bring them back in the district so that they are comfortable, the parents are comfortable. Families who are out of district currently did bring to our attention that sometimes they feel disconnected from the district because they're not receiving school level communications. They want to know when the ice cream social is. They want to know if there's an ice skating thing going on because they want to be part of the community. The school is the hub of a community when you're a parent. So I think it's really important that if out of district parents aren't already on an email blast or something, and I'm not trying to give you more email. I'm not. Okay, so you can. So that's why I say opt out, right? If you don't want the email, opt out. But I think it's really important that the district, you know, makes that proactive attempt to bring the kids into the community. Okay. Next theme is creative programming. So look, continue to explore these partnerships, shared services, and also this idea of insourcing programs to return or make sure you keep students in the district. So there's a lot of entities. You're already partnering with some of them in this district. There's other entities that you might want to think about. Sometimes jointure commissions can insource programs for you. They bring the staff, they bring the administrators, they bring the BCBA. They bring it all in. That might be an option. Also, I know you do look at shared service agreements with districts, you know, in the county and around. Continue to do that. Although I do know, we did a little scoping out as of December 1st. There weren't many options. I think based on your district's needs, there weren't many options around here as of December 1st. That changes all the time with shared services agreements, but you know, other districts don't. You know, they're in the same resource situation as you find yourself too. Again, you might want to insource. You use some agencies that seem to be very teachers are satisfied, and they seem to be providing some good programming. Uncommon Thread is one that you use. I would continue to use that, and also maybe reach out to NJ Coalition for Inclusive Education as well. If you've done that in the past, might want to see if you can bring them in maybe for some of these trainings that we're talking about. And then continue to expand the vocational technical options for students. You know, the VOTech offers some options, especially in terms of scheduling. You could do a half day there, which is a nice scheduling option sometimes. So keep it in mind. I know you do, because I know you have students there. I was talking with the high school principal. I know you use this. Just want to keep all options on the table in terms of creatively designing programs for kids. IEPs, so we're recommending some follow-up training on IEPs. You've had a lot of changes in, well, not a lot, but you've had some changes in CST over time, right? You want to make sure those IEPs are consistent. So, you know, we did find some errors, and parents showed us some examples of errors. So you just want to make sure that, again, you take a look at this. I know this requires time and it requires human resources. For this right here is another clear symptom for us, a symptom of staff who are stretched thin. That's not an excuse, it's a reality. You do have to correct it, okay? Maybe a system of internal random auditing, internal doing that, okay? Goals and objectives individualized based on specific skills, identified in need of remediation, and data to support their need. This comes back to the progress monitoring piece. Really want to make sure that those goals and objectives derive directly from data. And again, data kind of goes through here with the PLAFs. Specific data, identify specific current levels, limit the inclusion of character traits. That's just a training issue for teachers, right? Sometimes general education teachers, they haven't been trained a lot on writing a PLAF, so they'll include things that are not really specifically related to needs. They'll include character traits. It's certainly nice to hear that someone has a nice disposition and whatnot, but it doesn't move the needle forward in terms of finding appropriate instructional strategies. Accommodations, modifications need to be updated regularly. Another one, you know, you see an IEP, and by high school, there's a lot of accommodations and modifications in there. Some of them are really no longer applicable to high school. So you just got to go through and weed and clean the IEPs on a regular basis. Again, it takes human resources to do that. The IEPs must be read clearly and understood clearly by special education, general education, paraprofessionals, and consistently implemented with fidelity. Again, I think if you can get some more time for vertical articulation and horizontal articulation with the teachers and the CST. I mean, the teachers asked very clearly, we'd love to have more time sitting with the CST members going through the IEPs, because they have insights that, you know, we just don't have. Also being able to go through with last year's teacher. Again, another set of insights that the new teacher just doesn't have, okay? Yes, same thing, goals and objectives. Just want to tighten those up. You have them, okay? Many of them are fine. We want to increase effectiveness and consistency here. If at all possible, I know this is really on a wish list, but it came up in several areas. You know, is it possible to have some input, special ed and general education teachers together in terms of just at least dialoguing about goals and objectives? And then professional development for writing PLAFs, of course. I already had a discussion with Winnie, and she'll disagree with me on this, but it came up quite a bit. The Skyward program seems to be a little bit of a thorn in the side of, in some areas. It does require printing of materials. It can cause a delay between IEPs looking updated and being updated. So it's something to look at. I know Winnie and I talked about it. You guys can fight it out from that. But we wanted to report it to you because it did come up as a theme. Okay, based on our discussions and our observations, ensure that the draft copy of the IEP is provided to and reviewed with the parents consistently at IEP meetings. Ensure those goals and objectives are reviewed as well. Modifications, same thing. You want to make sure you consistently note parent concerns during the IEP meetings. advise parents of their rights to signing that document and review that process, ensure all the staff members are present throughout the meeting. Look, I know this is another scheduling issue. I get it. Schedules are tight. It is, but if the staff member is not going to stay, all you have to do is just make sure that you get the permission of the parent for the staff member to leave. Okay, that was done in some cases, just wasn't done consistently. So we want to make it consistent. Just take a look at the number of goals in those IEPs as well. Some of the IEPs had a lot of goals. Some had extensive amount of goals. I'm myself looking at those and my team members, and we're just wondering how they're all possibly progress monitored. So choose those goals wisely, progress monitor them in depth. In the resource room, we saw, and this is not uncommon, as you go up the grade levels, we saw greater use of pockets of whole class teaching. And again, that's not uncommon as you get into the upper middle school levels and the high school level. So there'd be a little more whole class and then a little less differentiation. Really just want to make sure that there's more differentiation, of course, in the resource room. Reemphasize the importance of differentiation? Yes, absolutely. And we really like to do that in a way that keys on the strengths of the student. All of our students have different learning strengths. We spend a lot of time identifying the weaknesses. Want to spend just as much time identifying the strengths, because that's really how we're going to take students to the next level. Continue to, and you already do this, continue to review those resource room placements to ensure that students are placed in the least restrictive environment. That is just something that's just an ongoing piece of special education, always looking to move students down that LRE, okay, down the continuum. And then you do a really nice job here of limiting the number of students in the resource rooms, especially in the lower grades. Your resource room numbers were very, very good. When I mean good, they were 3, 4, 5 students, and you can see the teacher's ability to spend time with each of the students, which was nice. And it really does limit, those smaller classes limit that use of whole class instruction. Okay, next one, culture of equity and collaboration. So, going back to my comment about Glen Ridge being a very academically, it's an academically focused district. That's not a positive, it's not a negative. It is what it is. But we think because it's like that, you do need to do things like you did with the disability fair and showcase the value of learning differences and kind of increase the visibility of special services and student services, because you do offer a lot. I'm not sure everybody's aware of how much you offer, and I'm not sure everybody's aware of the value of what you offer and what it really does for students. So along with that is, and I know the administrator's been working on this because they showed me some things that they were doing, this idea of shared responsibility among the staff. So we really want to continue to work on all students being our students, not her students, not those students. And that just really brings that kind of culture of equity and collaboration together. That leads right into this idea of sharing the responsibility. You want to make sure that shared responsibility is there. So you do that. One way to do it is through training that provides the general education teachers with kind of hands-on experiences with some of these disabilities. There's groups out there that come in and will do actual, you get a hands-on feeling of what some of these disabilities are like. And I think as a general education teacher, sometimes that's what you need. You need to really live it, to understand it. And I think that could help change. And it's not that it's not that your teachers don't want to do the right thing. They do. They were wonderful. But I think sometimes you just need that experience to fully understand and be in the shoes of somebody else. And so, that leads us to the IEPs need to be implemented and as written in all the classes, regardless of grade level or course level. And so that also means you really want to make sure, this is something I think you want to look at a little more in depth, is to make sure that all the students that are eligible for things like honors and AP are in those classes if they meet the entrance requirements. The IEP should not be part of the entrance requirements. Okay, the entrance requirements are the entrance requirements. The IEP is then implemented in the class. Progress monitor, I've already talked about it enough, I think. It's all about data. You are collecting a lot of data. We just want to see that data to be a little more specific. So I think you need to systematize that in terms of checklists and what kinds of data should be collected in certain cases. Pump that out to the teachers and give them some training on these types of data. Culture of progress monitoring should be throughout the district. One thing that's sometimes helpful is you give teachers a list of acceptable data that they should report for INRS and these RTI things, and also when making a recommendation. Adopt a strength-based approach with data collection, so not only look for weaknesses, we should make it a point to also look for strengths. Just as much as we look for the things that need help, we want to look for the ways that students already can help themselves, and we need to tap into that. Okay, so that's just called a strengths-based approach or an asset-based approach. Not that you're not doing it, we want to see it done consistently. Staffing, so how did we come to this? Again, we started going through all these data, and we were having our discussions and started talking about what we're seeing and why we think we're seeing it. And it always came down to, they really need somebody to be looking at this, monitoring this, looking at this. And a lot of the things we found were symptoms of this. And so I called Dirk, and I said, Dirk, can you get me a comprehensive list of all the things that Jack does? Because I had already interviewed the principals, okay? And the principals were telling me things that they do. And they are also very, very involved in special education issues, to the point where, as a former principal, what happens is when you're very involved at the granular level in special education, I'm making decisions that I believe as a principal are the best for the students in my building. Other principals are making decisions based on what they believe are the best for the students in their building, but those decisions may not be fully aligned to the strategic plan or the plan of the special services across the district. So when you have multiple hands in the pot making different recipes, they're going to come out different. That's happening because you have a lack of middle-level management. When I got the list of, and I'm just using Jack as one example. When I got the list of the things that he's responsible for, my having supervised directors of special education and so forth, and I looked at it, I said, well, that looks a little large. But let's investigate this. So sent it out to my team. They're all special education directors or supervisors. They looked at it and said, yeah, no, this is there's more on here than we certainly do. And so then what we did is we went out to our network. We didn't use the district name. We didn't identify anybody. We just said, hey, here's a list of duties that a director we know has. Talk to us about that. We couldn't find anybody who had that list. And different districts, different regions. Okay, we looked at different size districts. The only places that we came up with that had lists that long were the little districts, like the one that I live in. 300 kids, there's a superintendent / principal, and then there's like this supervisor of everything. Okay? That person had that kind of list. But nobody, even 1,000 student districts didn't have that. They had a supervisor in there. So then it started to make a little more sense to us that, there's inefficiencies, because I think there's this idea of the law of diminishing returns, right? The more efficient you are, the less efficient you actually become. So that might be something to think about. We could not find a list like that. Doesn't mean it's not out there, it's just not at this size district. That also brings us to this idea of investigating the potential for BCBA, OT, Orton Gillingham. These types of programs have been very well received. I think they're very appreciated on the part of parents, and they're very much utilized. And so you have people who are, they're definitely fully scheduled, okay? So if you're looking, if there's areas where we would say, after you get this administrative position, this coordination position to kind of monitor all of this, think about this next level of service over the next 4 or 5 years. And I think when you put a middle level supervisor with these kinds of services here, then I think you really begin to level up the consistency and the effectiveness. Okay, stakeholder education. I think you have opportunities here with CPAC and GRACE and bringing in NJCIE, expand the parent trainings, disseminate information. I think the more information you can get out, the better things are for everybody. It doesn't mean everybody's going to agree. I'm under no, I understand that. Special education is highly emotionally charged. There's going to be disagreements. That's naturally part of the process, but I think the more information that's out on the table, the better discussions can take place. Update your FAQ document with even more information, common questions. Maybe think about creating a kit for parents, like Welcome to Special Education, that has things like digital postcards, steps for timelines, processes, links to the directory of services, your chain of command, FAQs, so that when you come into the program, you have access to the information that you need to start to make decisions. And if you can't make decisions, at least you have information that will help you ask better questions during the process. And I think that's key, because that keeps the dialogue going. INRS, Intervention Referral Services. I think that the purpose of this really needs to be reestablished across the district. Again, because you have each school operating effectively, but operating as their own entity, and you might want to take a systemic approach to this. So you want to reestablish that. You want to make sure that teachers understand this is not a path to classification. INRS is a path to more strategies to help students be successful and remain in the general education environment. So we really want to take advantage of that process and implement it with fidelity. Okay, that requires monitoring. So you want to look at the fidelity of implementation there and make sure that it's being used the way it is. Again, progress monitoring, we're coming back to it. When you go into an INRS meeting, the INRS team gives the teacher strategies that he or she should use over a certain number of weeks. You have to monitor those specifically to see their impact on the student, bring that back to INRS, talk about that data, say, hey, okay, are we making progress? Can we change these strategies, make even more progress, or do we need to start thinking about a different direction? So you got to go through several iterations of that before you move down to even thinking about doing something else. Okay, same thing with RTI. Monitor, 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 adjust. Okay, so again, just your teachers already know about this. I think it's just a small training to kind of bring this back to their mind and give them some more tips on progress monitoring. Because if you're going to move forward with special education testing, it's got to really be made based on how everything else went before it. Because those data from INRS and RTI could also be very helpful if you do move to special education. Academic development. So this is a school-specific issue here. Okay, I understand that it's not systemic, but it is, because all of your students eventually, have access to this through special education services and so on and so forth. So right now, there's definitely, I would say, inconsistent satisfaction with the AD program as it's currently structured. That was made loud and clear to us during interviews, and then we went in, and the high school principal, my day at the high school was outstanding. I can't even remember how many classes we saw, but he did such a great job of getting us into all different classes. I sat in on several AD classes. My description is that it's kind of undefined in its content right now. Doesn't mean you get rid of it. Nope. You absolutely don't get rid of it. You're actually lucky to have it. A lot of schools don't have it. Your teachers are doing the best they can. They're out there actively soliciting topics from teachers. They're trying to find things to do with the kids to make sure that it's positive for them. So the teachers are doing what they're supposed to do. It comes down to structure of the program. And so this is just an example. But as we, talking with the principal, talking with the teachers, looking what the students did, listening to the parents, guardians, and caregivers, one way to remake this program, it's only one, okay, it's just one way, but you might want to tier it. Because there's certain things that it looks like pretty much all of your 7th and 8th graders would benefit from. And that certain thing is executive functioning skills. Okay? They're coming from RAS up to the high school. It's a whole different ball game in terms of staying organized, knowing how to stay organized, knowing how to advocate. Executive functioning skills would go a long way. So you'd actually have a curriculum for AD. Okay? 7th and 8th grade, they would get that curriculum, and it would be a mini lesson every day. Because you still want to give time for that extra help. So you have a mini lesson on executive functioning, then you put that to use in the class. So 7th and 8th grade, highly structured executive functioning. Then maybe you have something like grades 9 and 10. They would focus on content assistance. Definitely, you're doing your classwork, but principles of executive functioning would be brought in when the teachers are noticing, oh, we're still having some trouble here, we're still having trouble getting organized here, scheduling's an issue here. They can do a mini lesson, bring it in. Then finally, that third tier is for 11th and 12th graders. They're on track to achieve graduation, right? You might service this a little bit differently. Might be a little more flexible. Maybe a general study hall course, and then 2 to 3 days a week there's targeted assistance. Just something a little bit more flexible for them as upperclassmen, but there's still support if they need it. Okay, and the teachers would all be trained on executive functioning, so they can plug that in. I'm thinking, across the board, executive functioning would be some good training for the teachers, just across the board. And then may require an addition, typo there, may require addition of maybe 5 additional periods in the schedule. But you know what? There's ways to get that, okay? And we talk about the ways to get that by looking about how staff are currently used. And I think if you can find 5 more periods a day, I think you could do some of this, which would be good for kids. Dyslexia, yep, the district has improved this area, you've increased it. Orton Gillingham seems to have been well received, okay? I observed an OG class, really, really positive for the kids. I'm very familiar with it myself through some of the work that I do. I think you just want to, now that you brought these services across different schools and different classrooms. I think now you want to make sure that the screening is kept consistent, and you want to make sure, I think, that your English language arts curriculum, the ELA curriculum, is infusing maybe more multisensory strategies in there. Because now that you have the OG teachers, more teachers are getting the framework of multisensory. They want training in it. Put it in the curriculum. I do need to note that I just want to make sure everybody understands, if you're diagnosed with dyslexia, according to the New Jersey Dyslexia Handbook, it doesn't automatically mean you need a special education service. Some of this can be done through INRS, RTI, okay? And I know the district is aware of that, but we kind of put that disclaimer in there for everybody. Invest in some professional, yep, especially, there's an area that doesn't seem to be covered as much in terms of mathematics, okay, with the dyscalculia, okay? I think teachers want training on that and talking to them. Some of them are less equipped for that. They're feeling more equipped for dyslexia now, so it was a great job on that. Start to bring in the math. Co-teaching, we talked about co-teaching, professional development on the various models that exist, parallel teaching, station teaching, alternative, team, complementary. There's all these different models that teachers can use. The one that seems to be used the most is kind of like one teach and one drift and provide assistance, but there's other models beyond that. So you just need to provide, there's specific professional development that you can provide. I know some districts use the power of 2, those kinds of things. It's all there. I think the one thing you want to do is, when you're working with teachers, you want to, after they receive their training, you want to ask them, what are the models that you're going to use in your classes, and what are the roles and responsibilities of each teacher? You want to make that clear so that everybody knows where everybody stands in the classroom, and you want to provide some training where they can make sure they can share their lesson plans and so on and so forth. Okay, and I think this is the last one. You can breathe a sigh of relief. No, I understand the time, but this is what we found, and I want to make sure that we present it to you, okay? Differentiated professional development. So I know, look, New Jersey continues to add mandated trainings. It takes up a lot of district time just in the mandated trainings that New Jersey has. And it continues to grow. But we heard loud and clear from the teachers, especially the special education teachers, please let us give some more input, okay? Because there are some topics that we could really, really key in on if we had some of our own training time. And they also want training time with their general education partners as well. So I think always, when you can, get their input and try to bring some of that in. Executive functioning training, it's right there. We see this as something that would be very, very helpful across the district for teachers, so that they're all aware of this. And then because your school administrators are so deeply involved in special education at this point, I think it's important that you also don't forget to include them in some of these trainings, so that that they can be right there with the teachers and make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay. So in closing, I think you have a strong foundation here. You have many positives. Obviously, dedicated staff. The kids are great. They were just so funny with me, especially the little ones. And then you have committed stakeholders, I think, definitely from what I heard you do. Overall, for us, it's too few people doing too many things, and that just creates some inconsistencies, and it does impact your effectiveness. Okay, questions from the board?
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for that very thoughtful and thought-provoking and comprehensive overview. I think that we on the board had the opportunity to review the written version, but this brings it alive to us. So, board members, questions?
Actually, I just have a couple more observations, but first of all, thank you very much. This was a huge education for me. I'm not terribly familiar with our special education programming in the district, not having personally benefited from it. So I've been very excited, about this report, to hear, and your feedback very much for your presentation really brings a lot of this to life. I would just like to request, and maybe something hopefully that could be done easily, for the report that's going to be published on our website, I think it would be very helpful for maybe some more explanation or some more context around special education, like particularly the acronyms and a lot of the language, even if it's like a glossary of terms or something to help those of us who are maybe not quite as familiar, just in general. And I certainly take your comment about the need for additional communication and for additional resources for parents that we can offer as a district. So, any guidance or any other thoughts, we would welcome that too. So, thank you.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
I had a couple. When you looked at the IEP reviews, did you review all of the IEPs or a selection of the IEPs?
No, we do. We started out with a random selection, and then we did specific ones based on IEP meetings and also based on the students that I observed in the classroom. So overall, we probably got to about 120, 130 IEPs. So almost every other one.
Like a third?
You have 319 kids. Yeah, a little more than a third. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember from our conversation, but I was curious how much of the identification of students as being classified occurred by private evaluations versus being done in district. And I wondered if you were able to look at that as well.
No, that would be something that's a little more student case specific, because there's a lot of different reasons why a parent might choose a private evaluation over a district evaluation. So that really brings us into specific cases where it's hard for us to get involved at that level.
Okay, and did you feel like the district was identifying students on their own?
Oh, yes.
Because that was my concern,
Yeah.
that many parents felt like they needed to go outside to get their students.
No, the district is definitely identifying students on their own. It's not uncommon in districts for parents to go out and also get evaluations done for themselves. Again, there's different reasons for that, and those reasons are generally very student-specific, so that's why it's really hard for us to get at that level. That would be a different type of review.
Okay. I was also concerned about the IEPs, both the goal setting and the data monitoring, and from your recommendations, I kind of got the impression that the goal setting needs additional professional development. For the data collection, do you feel like the child study team knows the data that should be collected and there's not a communication with the classroom teachers, or they need professional development in communicating the appropriate types of data that should be collected both on the student and on the program?
Yeah, no, look, overall, I think we feel comfortable that the child study team knows the data that has to be collected. There's definitely needs to be a greater communication down to the teachers, but we see that as a time issue. Child study team needs to have the time, and that's also, yes, you can do that in large groups, but then teachers also need specific kind of one-on-one coaching with that, which is also a time issue. But it's definitely something that we do think needs to occur.
And then can you elaborate a little bit on the different models for co-teaching? Because I kind of got the impression from your report that you were not such a big fan of the dominant mode that we've been using.
Yeah, so the dominant mode that you've been using is one teach. It's called one teach, one drift, or one teach, one assist, okay? And so it can be effective, okay? But there's some other models that are a little more, we think, proactive, and they could also differentiate the classroom a little bit. One teach, one assist is mainly used for whole class instruction. When you have two teachers in the classroom, you also have the option, if it's instructionally appropriate, to reduce the student-teacher ratio, because you have two certified teachers. So one example of that would be you could use parallel teaching. Parallel teaching is when both teachers are still teaching the same exact thing. They've just taken, and they now have two smaller groups. The two smaller groups allows for more one-on-one targeted assistance. The other one is station teaching, where you can create differentiated stations around the room. Two teachers are monitoring that. Two of the stations would be specific teachers, and they would be doing targeted instruction on different skills at those stations, and then the kids would be moving around, the stations would be differentiated. Okay? Another one is alternative teaching, where it's kind of like the idea, it's not exactly, but it's like this idea of taking a small group of students. So you have, you'll see a small group of students who might need a little more quick remediation. Teacher would take them, do an alternative quick lesson, and then everybody would come back and return. So those are just three options that exist. I think there's 6 or 7 models altogether, but those models do change the environment, in the learning environment in the classroom, and it can reduce student-teacher ratio, increase differentiation. Okay.
I was a little confused because at one point there was sort of discussion about if paraprofessionals and sort of the dearth of them or the qualifications, but then in another part about the co-teaching, it was sort of recommending perhaps using paraprofessionals instead of the certified teachers.
Oh no! So what we're talking about there is, depending. Again, this is you got to go really granular here to look at this. But there could be instances, okay, where you have a class. Let's say we saw a class that had 12 or 13 students in it, two certified teachers. Okay, the class was operating at pretty high level. Okay, so from our perspective, high level class. I think it might be time to take a look at, do you need a certified teacher in there versus a trained paraprofessional? Because the academic, social, emotional needs of the students in that class the needs were low. Very, very, very high functioning class, functioning well. So in our mind then we say, okay, so we have a teacher here where it might be time, and this might be going on right now, the IEPs might be being reviewed, I don't know, might be time to take a look at these IEPs, and see, is this level of service necessary? Because what you could do is you move students down the LRE, right, by matching the service that they need at that time. You may be over-servicing. They could gain greater independence through a paraprofessional, and then you could pick up a couple periods of a certified teacher to go redo the AD program, okay? But you have to look at the pieces that you have and the needs you have at that moment. And so we do think there are some areas that could be possibly served by a trained paraprofessional. But again, that, you have to look at every student in that class.
And I guess I had one more question. I saw this note about the students with ADHD who, their assessment grades were good, but their, submission of assignments was really pulling their grade down. I was wondering, were you sort of suggesting that like standard-based grading or adjusting like the percentage they'd have to complete so their grade wouldn't be so heavily hit necessarily?
Sometimes in the IEP, and you're doing this because based on the disability and the characteristics of the disability that are coming out in the class. So for some students, not all, some students with ADHD, meeting deadlines is part of the disability, okay? So just like any other aspect of a disability, we would write an accommodation and a modification. Homework could be one of those issues. Okay? We found that in some instances it appeared that report card grades were going lower because homework was not completed, but you have students who in their IEP clearly exhibiting that kind of disability related to ADHD. Not every ADHD student has that, okay? But the ones that we saw did, and so we raised the question. Could you consider making homework part of an accommodation or modification? Doesn't mean the student's not doing homework. The work gets done, okay? But the schedule in which it gets done is different to accommodate the disability.
Recommend an asset-based approach to the data collection. Are you suggesting that for that position that's not filled right now? You're suggesting
Oh, no, look.
Or are you suggesting we need more CST members as well?
In the report, we did notice that it's not that CST is overloaded. It might be in one area where I don't even want to say overloaded. It might be in one area where they may need a little more support. But in terms of data collection and using an asset-based approach, I think you can begin to do that work now. It's just going to be hard to monitor the implementation of that.
Okay, other board member questions?
So I appreciate the number of recommendations you've offered to us, but I have to say I'm a little bit overwhelmed. And I was hoping you might be able to give us a little additional guidance. You've talked about the 3 general categories of recommendations being within staffing, communication, and then incorporating more systemic processes. And of course, staffing comes down to funds and communication somewhat as well. Can you speak to how we can incorporate systemic processes even without that mid-level administrator in place? What approaches you've seen other districts take that maybe are as thinly staffed as ours?
Well, as I stated earlier, we haven't seen many districts with the director's position holding so many other responsibilities. Okay, and so I think a lot of districts get to where we are recommending through that supervisory level. Now, it's hard for us to talk about the budget because we didn't do an audit of the budget.
I'm not asking you to talk about the budget. I'm asking you what can be done. Sort of, are there areas where we are currently lacking systems, where systems could be put in place and they could be followed, versus there are areas where we have systems, but we aren't following them because we don't have the people to do that work?
No, I think for the most part you have the systems. I think it's an issue of ensuring those systems or ensuring the processes are followed across the system. So one thing that you probably don't need a person to do is through the creation of different checklists. Just for some of the more straightforward things like IEPs and meetings, and making sure that we just go down doctors use them, astronauts use them, airline pilots use them. Everybody uses them. It's okay to use them. I think that's something that could be helpful to the team members the teachers, because the teachers want to know, what do I have to, just tell me what I have to do, I'll do it. Your teachers are going to do it. They just need to know what it is I need to do. So checklists I found are real good. Flow charts, another one for people who are visual, okay? So I think over time you can certainly install checklists and flow charts, absolutely.
Okay. Other board member questions?
May I ask a
Jocelyn,
follow-up?
okay.
So when you were talking about the culture of equity and collaboration, you mentioned sort of our academic orientation, and I just wondered whether you were speaking about our culture overall as a district of staff, parents, students, or where you were getting this finding from.
It's an overall culture of the district, and I don't think that's unknown to anybody. And it just comes out. It comes out in the comments that people make, the way they describe programs, so on and so forth. It's not. We didn't feel that anyone was being negative. It just, we pick up on it as outsiders, and we hear the language that's used by people and the way they describe things. And so I think that's the benefit of having an outsider, because we're from the outside and we can determine those. So we heard it as a total culture.
I have one more follow-up question. You mentioned both in the report and your presentation that inclusion should be the goal, particularly within K-6. Just for the benefit of all of us here, can you talk about what inclusion means and why it adds value to any district?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, it's a goal, but it has to be based on data, okay? Because you obviously want to match the program to the needs of the student, and I think that's first and foremost. The intent of the continuum of services is to make sure that we're constantly looking for opportunities to help students to be more independent in the least restrictive environment. And inclusion is obviously towards the ultimate in that service, to have the students in the general education environment. So yes, it's a focus, but it has to be based on data. And I think that's why progress monitoring is so important, because that's going to come in to tell us where the students are at, the needs that they have, and who can be successful and supported in what segment of the continuum. Because you have all different programs here. Your continuum is well represented. The continuum of services is well represented here. So I don't want you to think that we're saying you have to force everybody into the least restrictive environment. No, we just want to make it clear, and we say this to all districts, you need to place the student where the data say the student should be placed. You're doing that, okay? You're doing that, but I think the progress monitoring could be, as we said in the report, the progress monitoring can be enhanced so that you're ensuring those decisions are based on the most relevant data. But you collect data, you have a lot of data, that's all being used. We're just talking about raising the consistency and effectiveness.
Other board member questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much.
For
Appreciate your
taking,
time.
the generosity that you've given of your time tonight, and answering our questions and fleshing the bones out of your report. I know that this is not the last we'll see of you, so thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Please stay well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Phillips, the rest of the superintendent's report, or do we have another presentation?
No, just my report.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to start off with some district news. One of our custodians, Giuseppe Giardina, will be retiring in September. He gave us his letter of retirement. Giuseppe has been with us since 2001. I've been fortunate to work with him in a few of the buildings here, and he's always a delightful person and always willing to lend a hand out, and he'll be missed. And I'm hoping that he enjoys his last several months here in Glen Ridge, and we certainly want to wish him the best. Dr. Harris mentioned this is Kindness Week in Central School. It is also Ridgewood Avenue Schools having their Kindness Challenge this week. So hopefully if you have a Ridgewood Avenue school child, that they're especially nice at home and offering to help their parents and being a good big brother or big sister whenever possible. I want to talk a little bit about Peace at Home. Peace at Home is a service that we've contracted with to provide more parental resources, and that happens through classes, conversations, coaching, and community connections. We will be reaching out to various Glen Ridge parent groups to introduce Peace at Home a little bit more so people become a little bit more familiar with their services. I know Jack's setting up a meeting with the Grace parents. We're working with the various home and schools, and we're working with our own staff so they can get the message out to parents. So we really hope you take advantage of those services. And no superintendent report would go undone without having a little discussion about the pandemic. When we came back from the December break, we really saw an extraordinary amount of cases within the district. And we took some actions right away, including the abbreviated schedules that we did for 2 weeks. And we certainly saw the numbers started to dip during that second week. And last week we were very pleased with the numbers as to the way, the decrease that we saw. So we're working with a lot of new guidance from the Department of Health. They have probably sent out about 3 or 4 memos from January 1st to last Friday. So we're trying to keep on top of everything and all their recommendations to make sure that we're providing a safe environment. Probably the most significant memo that went out was just the change in isolation and quarantine times down to from 10 days to 5 days. I'm sure most parents are aware of that already. We're doing our best to make sure we're implementing that and making sure those students, when they return for days 6 through 10, that they're following the protocols of keeping those masks on at all times, and trying to keep them at a safe social distance when they're eating, and their mask has to be off. As a reminder, the mask mandate was extended for 30 days. It was set to expire on January 11th, so we'll be watching that in the coming month. We want to look a little bit at our region's numbers, and you can see what happened within our school community with really high numbers coming off that December break. Was also the same time that our region in the state saw a peak. That second week back in January, we saw a dip, and in that third week, again, we're seeing dips. The red color represents a very high risk level. Last week, we had 2 of our 3 metrics in that very high risk level. And the third metric is on the border. I expect by the end of this week, when the new Cali report comes out, that we will drop from the very high risk level down to a high risk level. And that will get rid of some of the mandates that were I shouldn't say mandates, some of the recommendations from the Department of Health. One of those recommendations had to deal with student participation in extracurricular activities. They wanted those students tested multiple times during a week. We were setting up testing for that to occur. Our testing site will be up and running for students this Wednesday and Thursday. We've delayed that recommended testing until we see numbers coming out from the state. But we are giving students the option who are involved in extracurricular activities to go and test after school on Wednesday or Thursday. And we're going to watch how that process works for our students. If we need to make adjustments, we will. And hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to open that up to all high school students who want the option of testing. So it's nice to have the testing available on our school site. And as Betsy gave a little update on the board goals, I do want to give a little update on district goals. As far as our ARP funds, since the grant has been approved, we've spent a lot of those first year allocated funds. We've hired 2 elementary academic support teachers. So they're making their way around to the 4 elementary schools. We hired a literacy consultant that is working with the 3 primary schools. We hired 3 part-time SEL counselors. We have after-school homework clubs going on in all the elementary schools. We're working on technology upgrades. We had some Promethean boards installed, and we have an ongoing process of installing and upgrading the Ridgewood Avenue access points to make sure that Wi-Fi is occurring cleanly and efficiently as possible. And what we're start doing with some of the funds that were allocated for this year is start planning out our summer program. So that last year was the first year that we've offered it, and we're going to continue to offer it using the ARP funds. The next district goal is DEI, and we'll continue to integrate activities throughout all the schools, whether they're happening in individual classrooms, they're happening at grade levels, or they're happening within the buildings. And that includes activities, but it's also being integrated within our lessons. We continue to put out a newsletter on the topic. Part of every teacher's professional growth plan is to learn and take workshops on DEI topics as far as professional development. In our October Professional Development Day for the district, the focus was on DEI, where we had a speaker to come in and present to our staff throughout the day. In February, the high school, we have a half-day professional development. The high school is having Garden State Equity come in and present. And in March, we are working with Montclair State University to come in and do some professional development on DEI topics. The Home and School has worked with the Glen Ridge Diversity Inclusion Association on doing some building-wide activities. We've had them in on some of our executive meetings to discuss how we can build a stronger relationship together, and they're joining us in the February meeting also. We've included DEI as part of our curriculum process, and this year we are reviewing the mathematics curriculum. So those teachers have already met to discuss how they can integrate topics into their math courses. We've increased the classroom libraries to include some more diverse choices for our students. Our administrators will be participating in the CJ Pride Job Fair that Betsy mentioned earlier, and most of our administrators attended Diversifying the Workshop Conference sponsored by William Patterson University. New Jersey recently passed a law requiring public schools to incorporate Asian American and Pacific Islanders history and contributions into their K through 12 curriculums beginning next school year. And part of that process, and Betsy had touched on it, is anytime there's a new mandate, new policy will come out. So you're going to be seeing that in the coming months, that we will have a policy developed, working with Strauss Esme, our policy firm, and we'll have our 2 public readings of that policy. But in the meantime, we'll be working on that mandate for next year by looking at material. Some of it's been shared by the Glen Ridge Diversity Inclusion Association. Some of those will be guidelines that the state will put out for us. And during the summer months, that's when we start rewriting and revisiting our curriculum for the following year, and that work will be done during the summer. And the last item is strategic planning, and I don't think I need to, just to go over that a little bit. As Betsy mentioned, we met last week. That was our 4th session out of 6. We are working on, we've worked on a mission statement, we've worked on vision statements. In the last meeting, we ended up looking at our vision statements and trying to identify data that supports or data that doesn't support our vision statements, and we're using that data set or lack of data set, that gap, to help us start understanding where we are in a district, and we're expecting that to lead us into our action plan. Our next meeting session will be on February 1st. And the last district goal was our special education audit, and I'm pretty sure that we all have a thorough understanding where we are with that. I thought Dr. Tankin did a tremendous job of presenting that information to us. There's a lot there to absorb, and that's why it's going to take a while for us to meet with the different groups, prioritize some of those recommendations. Some of them will be easier to accomplish than others, but we'll keep our goal on that 5-year plan of hopefully getting moving the special education program forward. So that is my report. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, any questions on the superintendent's report before we go to public comment?
Dirk, if you could just reiterate the findings of the special education audit for maybe an hour, so that would be.
I'll give you, we do have a meeting tomorrow, Mr. DeLu. I can review it there with you.
Okay, now we've come to the first public comment for comments or questions on agenda items only. The procedure for those who've been with us before is unchanging. If you have a question or comment, please come to the lectern, sign in, identify yourself, confirm your Glen Ridge residency, and we have a 2-minute time limit, which I will be keeping track of with the stopwatch function of my phone. And that is pretty much the protocol. So, does anyone have a public comment or question?
Hi, good evening. Tricia Akinwandi, GRDIA. Dirk, can you expand upon your the comment with respect to diversity in mathematics and then the review of diversity, the curriculum over the summer? Thank you.
Not a problem. So our curriculum cycle review is a 5-year cycle. So every year, one of our major content area is reviewed. This year it happens to be mathematics. Within our curriculum guides, there is a diversity component to it, which we've put in roughly about 2.5 years ago. Currently, it's included with our language arts and our social studies. As we're doing mathematics this year, we're looking at ways we can incorporate DEI content into the mathematics curriculum. So that might be instructional strategies. It might be at a historic perspective, or people who've given contributions to the world of mathematics. Throughout this year, they're going to be reviewing our curriculum. They'll be looking at not only DEI, they'll be articulating grade level to grade level. They'll be looking at, well, in the past we've had state standardized scores, but because of the pandemic, we really haven't had them in the last couple of years. That's something we would typically look at. They'll be reviewing textbook programs. So it's all part of the curriculum process, and DEI has become a part of that process for us. The second component is, during the school year, the teachers are teaching. They're planning lessons, they're grading, they're communicating with parents, with other staff members, with the child study team. They're involved in extracurricular activities. They're building level meeting, grade level meetings. So there isn't the time to really focus on creating a curriculum during the school year. So as they're working and participating in the curriculum review committee throughout the year, it's really comes to an apex at the summertime, when that's the time they have the opportunity to rewrite the curriculums. And that's when that will happen. And if we need to make it adjust, like as I mentioned, math is the curriculum content area that's going to be rewritten this year, but there's always the opportunity to go back and revise other curriculums, and that frequently happens during the summertime.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? I see, yes.
Hi, my name is Robin Fields. I live at 21 Summer Avenue. I just want to thank the board for putting it out there to have a special education audit. I think Dr. Tinkin's presentation was pretty amazing, very eye-opening. I hope the board takes his recommendations very seriously. Just want to comment that I really support it. And for those of you who are not familiar with special education, as I was not and have been educated, it doesn't mean that these children are any less intelligent than others. They just learn in different ways, and they need a little more support. So thank you so much for that. And thank you, Dr. Harris, because I didn't know anything really that's going on at Central School, and it's just really, it makes me happy to see you so happy and enthusiastic about being there. So that just warmed my heart. Thank you, and thank you all for the work that you do.
Thank you. And yes, to add to your thanks to Dr. Harris, I think it made everybody feel so good and warmed all of our hearts and opened all of our hearts. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Goldman, 25 Rain Street in Glen Ridge. I am a member of the Glen Ridge Association for Special Education, also known as GRACE, and the Glen Ridge Special Education Parents Advisory Committee, also known as the CPAC. I also want to thank the board for conducting the special education audit. I look forward to seeing the recommendations implemented. I want to specifically discuss the correspondence I had with the board.
Yes.
The correspondence was about creating an opportunity for parents to ask questions about the special education audit. I do want to thank Superintendent Phillips for creating that opportunity. However, when Grace and the CPAC found out that the district was planning an event on February 10th, we contacted the district and said, well, that kind of conflicts with what we're planning. We're planning a meeting in mid-February to allow parents to aggregate their questions and then submit those questions to the district in advance of our March meeting. By scheduling a meeting February 10th, the district runs the risk of cannibalizing the work that the parents are doing. I'm sure there's a logic to rejecting an invitation to the parent advisory committees on special education when doing this, but right now it escapes me. So I'm going to ask a question where there is an opportunity. Will you consider not postponing this February 10th meeting until you can collaborate with Grace and the CPAC in the scheduling of these events? And in so doing, these goals were supposed to take 1 to 5 years. You can knock one of these goals out of the park in a day, collaborate with Grace and the CPAC. It's a win-win. Just talk to us, okay? Just talk to us and let us all work towards the same goal. Thank you.
That's certainly not a problem, Mr. Goldman. We will make sure we work with you, and if you want to delay a meeting, I'm never have a problem with that. I'm sure it will fill up with another meeting.
Yes, and I think our primary motivation was not to not collaborate, but to do. We felt like sooner is always better than later with these things while things are still fresh. So, apologies for the confusion.
No, everyone is trying to do the right thing, and really, really grateful. We just want to be on the team. Thanks.
Thank you.
No problem.
Other questions or comments?
Hi, Harris Duran. I have kids in the district. I would just like to know if you can discuss the difference between out-of-district placement and settlement agreements that have tuition or partial tuition to other schools or other school districts. And do the settlement agreements, if they do include tuition, and I'm not asking for specific people to talk about anybody's private, I'm talking about as general consensus. If a settlement agreement has money that's going to other schools, does that become in part of that 7% of out-of-district placement?
Is that it?
No, I also wanted to know if you had any other suggestions for people who are going to age out in 5 years, who have current issues with special education and some of the things that are going on, and who might not have time for 5 years to wait for their students to get some of these changes. Or were there any short-term goals that he gave in there, or what he's saying is going to just take 4 or 5 years?
So I'm going to, because legally perspective, when you're talking about out-of-district and settlement agreement, I'm going to turn it over to Athena, our school attorney.
So
With regard to the 5 years, there's not, the recommendations aren't in 5 years we'll do something. There's
No, Dirk
recommendations
said you were
for.
just doing out-of-district placement.
Sure, just let me answer the second part first. That there are recommendations that can occur immediately, and then there's longer-term planning. So that's the idea behind some of the recommendations in the plan. With regard to out-of-district placements, I can't say what Dr. Tankin looked at specifically in terms of the numbers, but typically out-of-district placements are those where students are placed via their IEP, which can be different than what is reflected in the confidential agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Tron.
I don't know if you really answered the question about how those two numbers, if in a confidential agreement we're paying for additional schooling or to go to a different school, that doesn't correlate to our out-of-district numbers at all. Is that correct?
I don't know what Dr. Tankin referred to in
I'm not
terms of
asking
this.
about Dr. Ting, I'm just asking in general.
Oh.
We have an out-of-district placement number that we have, and it seems in the last couple of years we've moved away some of that to settlement agreement. And I'm curious if the settlement agreements that we as a community help pay for, that are paying for students to go to other schools, are incumbent in that number of out-of-district placements. Because he said our out-of-district placement number wasn't high. But is that including settlement agreements of students to go to other schools?
I can find out, because I don't know what he looked at for purposes of the 7% number, is what I'm saying.
Okay, you'll be able to get back to me. He did mention maybe a timeline to get back to people, so do you know a timeline you might be able to get back to me on that?
So he mentioned a timeline for receipt when parents are sending in emails, but I can certainly ask him and look at the data and then respond to you with regard to what the percentage consists of.
Do you know in what kind of timeline? I mean, this is the communication breakdown that people are talking about.
It's not a breakdown. We're trying to answer the question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head in terms of what the percentages included, so we can
Do you think
certainly
it would be a week
get
or
that
a
done.
month or 6 months?
Thank you, Mr. Tron. Your time is up. Other questions or comments? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Mr. Goldman, if you can wait till the second public comment.
You know what, I really don't want to, because this is very quick. I don't understand why a question about a definition of special education services is for outside counsel who doesn't have the answer. I don't understand why the last questioner couldn't get an answer to the question of what's the difference between an out-of-district placement and the settlement agreement from his elected representatives. It would be one thing if council actually had the answer, but council doesn't. So I would like to ask if anybody on the board, or anybody in the district, can answer that question. What's the difference between an out-of-district placement and a settlement agreement? Because I really think that's like kind of a thing you should know. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I'm sorry? This is not a back and forth session. We can certainly provide those definitions. This is not a back and forth session. This is not a public forum. We can get you that information, those definitions, but this is not the place to pose specific questions of that. This is not a gotcha session for the Board of Education. Are there other public comments? If so, please come to the microphone. Okay, board members, you have minutes. I should say that we will not do committee and liaison reports tonight unless there's something that is time sensitive. Does anyone have a time sensitive matter? Okay, you have minutes from the board meeting of January 5th, 2022, exec session and regular session minutes. Does anyone have any changes to those minutes? Okay. If that is the case, Michael, would you move the minutes?
Sure, I'll move M1.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jocelyn. If there are no, since there are no changes, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Abstain.
Mr. DeLu,
I also abstain, I was not here.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. O'Neill,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern, Dr. Yaris Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye. Motion carries. You have administrative items. Tracy, would you move the administrative items?
Yes, I move A1 and A2.
Okay. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Anthony. Okay. Any changes or questions on the administrative items? Anything? All right, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. O'Neill,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Personnel, Tracy, would you move the personnel items?
I move P1 through P7.
Okay. May I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jocelyn. In keeping with our rules and protocols, personnel items are discussed in executive session. Board members, if there is no objection, yeah, I'm sorry? I'm sorry, P7?
Superintendent.
Yeah,
contract.
should be.
Okay,
to the-
thank you. So we'll do that as amended.
I'll wait till year 4 and 5 before I say thank you.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments before we move it forward? Okay, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. O'Neill,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern, Dr. Yaris Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye,
Motion carries.
thank you. Michael, would you move the curriculum?
Yeah, I'll move
Item.
C1.
Okay, may I have a second? Second from Heather. Any questions on the curriculum item? Okay, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. O'Neill,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, before we move the business items, I would like to draw your attention to item B3, donations, which is a donation from the Epstein family, and I should say this is an annual donation from the Epstein family of $1,800 to be divided equally among the Glen Ridge High School ice hockey, football, and boys lacrosse teams. Okay. David is not here. Duval, would you move the business items?
Sure. I move B1 to B4.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Second from Jocelyn. Okay, you're the great seconder tonight, I think, Jocelyn. Thank you. Any questions or concerns about the business items? All right.
I'm sorry,
I'm
it's not
sorry?
not a concern, but I just wanted to point out that there is a workshop for co-teaching strategies. So I thought that was relevant to what we discussed earlier tonight.
It is. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, Barbara, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bonnet,
Aye.
Mr. DeLu,
Aye.
Ms. Gottlieb,
Aye.
Ms. Graham,
Aye.
Ms. O'Neill,
Aye.
Ms. St. Aubern,
Aye.
Dr. Yaris Ramos, Ms. Ginsburg.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we've reached the second public comment period for public comments on agenda or other items pertaining to the running of the schools. Does anyone have a public comment?
Eric Goldman again. You know, I would ask for clarification on why you described my question as a gotcha question, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't get an answer. I'm just going to say that I'm deeply disappointed that you chose to speak to me that way. It was not a shining moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? All right, that being the case, may I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Tracy. May I have a second? Second from Duval. Thank you all.